December 6th, 1917. Halifax, Nova Scotia. In the fourth year of the Great War, this Canadian port city is a vital artery for the Allied effort. Every day, its deep, ice-free harbor teems with the machinery of conflict and relief. Convoys of warships and merchant vessels gather here, preparing for the perilous journey across the Atlantic. The city itself hums with a nervous energy, its population swollen by soldiers, sailors, and munitions workers. The air is cold, the water a slate gray. On this morning, two vessels are preparing to traverse this slender channel. Their paths are set to converge in a way that will forever alter the city's fate. One is the SS Mont-Blanc, a French cargo ship. It has just arrived from New York, and its journey has been cloaked in secrecy, for good reason. Below its decks is a volatile, city-destroying payload. More than 2,300 tons of picric acid, 250 tons of TNT, and 246 tons of benzol, a highly flammable fuel. On its deck, barrels of benzol are stacked high. In total, the ship carries a destructive power unprecedented in human history, an explosive force equivalent to nearly 3 kilotons of TNT. Steaming outwards from the harbor is the SS Imo, a Norwegian vessel sailing empty under charter for the Belgian Relief Commission. Its captain is impatient, its speed too high for the narrow channel. Due to other traffic, both ships find themselves on a collision course. Under the rules of the sea, the ships should have passed starboard to their right, but the Mont Blanc was hugging the wrong shoreline. A series of misunderstood signals, blasts from their steam whistles, echo across the water. One blast from the Imo. I am directing my course to starboard. Two blasts from the Mont Blanc. I am directing my course to port. Confusion reigns. Neither captain will yield their position. A collision is now inevitable. Both pilots order their engines reversed, but it is far too late. The several thousand tons of momentum in each vessel is too great. At 8:45 a.m., the two ships connect. It isn't a dramatic crash, but a grinding metallic scrape. The Imo's bow cuts into the Mont Blanc's #1 hold. For a moment, it seems the danger has passed. But as the Imo reverses, the scraping steel creates a shower of sparks. The impact has toppled the barrels of benzol stored on deck. The volatile liquid pours out, and its fumes find the ignition source. Instantly, a fire erupts. Thick, oily black smoke billows into the sky, a stark column against the clear winter morning. The crew of the Mont Blanc knows the truth. They do not fight the fire. They abandon ship immediately. They know their vessel is no longer a ship, but a timer on the world's largest bomb. They row for their lives, screaming warnings in French that no one on the shore can understand. Their cries are lost in the vastness of the harbor. The burning ghost ship begins to drift. Propelled by the tide, the burning vessel drifts directly towards the crowded Richmond shoreline, its fire growing more intense with every passing second. On shore, the fire is a spectacle. No one knows the danger. Crowds gather at windows and along the waterfront to watch the magnificent, terrible sight. The Halifax Fire Department responds with bravery and ignorance. The crew of the city's first motorized pumper, the Patricia, races to be the first on the scene, eager to fight the most dramatic fire the city has ever seen. The ship comes to rest against Pier 6, setting it ablaze. The firefighters direct their hoses at the inferno, unaware they are standing at ground zero of a bomb more powerful than any army had ever deployed. Nearby, railway dispatcher Vince Coleman is about to flee when he remembers an incoming passenger train from St. John with hundreds of people on board. He returns to his key and taps out a final, desperate message. Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for Pier 6, and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. The fire burns for nearly 20 minutes. The heat builds. The pressure inside the hull intensifies, turning the picric acid from a solid to a volatile, superheated liquid. The bomb is armed. At 9:04 and 35 seconds a.m., the ship and everything near it cease to exist, converted instantly into gas and energy. A 3-kiloton explosion, the largest man-made blast in history before the atomic bomb, tears Halifax apart. A pressure wave of unimaginable force obliterates the city's north end. Buildings, factories, and homes are flattened in an instant. The shock wave shatters windows for 50 miles in every direction, causing thousands of eye injuries to those who had been watching the fire. Debris rains down across the city. The Mont-Blanc's half-ton anchor is found more than 2 miles away. One of its cannons lands 3.5 miles in the opposite direction. The blast displaces so much water, it creates a tsunami, which surges over the devastated shoreline, washing away everything that the initial explosion had not. In the seconds after the blast, a stunned silence falls, soon replaced by the sounds of destruction and human suffering. An entire district of a modern city has been erased. Nearly 2,000 people are killed instantly or fatally wounded. Another 9,000 are injured. Many are buried in the wreckage of their own homes, schools, and workplaces. Survivors emerge into a nightmare landscape. A strange black rain, a mixture of benzol, soot, and water from the vaporized harbor begins to fall, coating everything in a greasy film. The city's industrial heart is gone. Factories, the railway yard, and the naval dockyards are annihilated. The economic engine of Halifax is silenced. Every surviving public building becomes a makeshift hospital. Doctors and nurses, many of whom are injured themselves, work tirelessly but are completely overwhelmed by the scale of the catastrophe. The SS Imo, the catalyst for the disaster, is thrown across the harbor and run aground on the Dartmouth side, a broken monument to the morning's fatal error. As if nature itself sought to compound the tragedy, the weather turns. The day after the explosion, one of the worst blizzards in a decade descends upon Halifax. A blizzard buries the city in more than a foot of snow. For the thousands left homeless and exposed, it is a second wave of death. Rescue efforts are severely hampered. Survivors trapped in the wreckage now face freezing to death. The blizzard silences the cries of many who might otherwise have been found. The storm cuts off what little communication Halifax has with the outside world, isolating the devastated city in a shroud of white. The temperature plummets. In the unheated shelters and wrecked homes, the fight for survival becomes a battle against the bitter cold as much as against injury. But the message sent by Vince Coleman and others had gotten through before the lines went down. Help was on the way. Within hours of the explosion, a relief train was dispatched from Boston, Massachusetts. Braving the blizzard, it arrived the next day, packed with doctors, nurses, and crucial supplies. It was the first wave of a massive international relief effort. In the weeks and months that followed, Halifax began the long, painful process of healing and rebuilding. The devastated North End was redesigned from the ground up. The disaster led to sweeping new regulations for the handling and transport of dangerous cargo in harbors around the world, creating a legacy of safety born from tragedy. And the bond forged in crisis endures. Every year since 1971, the people of Nova Scotia send the city of Boston a magnificent Christmas tree, a thank you for the help that arrived in their darkest hour. The Halifax explosion was a story of catastrophic failure and unimaginable loss. but it is also a story of heroism, of resilience, and of a community that refused to be extinguished, a city that rose, quite literally, from the ashes.